They offered me on the spot and I committed on the spot. After that happened, a lot of the schools that thought I was talented, thought I could play college ball, but were hesitant to be the first large P5 offer, started checking in. But at that point, I was already committed. I'm a quarterback in everything that I do. When I'm on that field, it's one of the best mind states that I'm in.
The face of NIL around the NCAA and UCLA star quarterback Chase Griffin joins the show today to share more about how college athletes around the country can participate in NIL, even if you're not in the big sports. Chase isn't just the reigning two-time NIL Athlete of the Year for no reason. He might be one of the most talented athletes in the NCAA on the field and in business. From turning down a Harvard scholarship to go play football at UCLA, to talking about his new podcast with NFL superstar Kayvon Thibodeau, where they talk about all things NIL, Chase is definitely making a name for himself in college athletics. And in today's episode, Chase breaks down exactly what you need to do as a college athlete looking to partner with brands and get into NIL the right way. Without further ado, join me for my conversation with UCLA quarterback Chase Griffin. Chase, thanks so much for being here. I'd love to start by you telling us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into football.
So I was actually born right down Wilshire in UCLA Santa Monica. So I was born there. I lived here for around 4 years and then grew up in Texas. We moved when I was around 4.5, 5. If you're in Texas, you got to play football. But my first sport was actually soccer. I grew up playing the violin and soccer from around the age of 4 and 5. And that taught me how to train, taught me how to compete. And I loved soccer. I was a very good player. I always tell myself if I had stayed in soccer, I'd be somewhere overseas playing right now. But the way that it's turned out has been a huge blessing. I got into football because I would play the soccer games on Saturday, and then on Sunday, I'd watch all the NFL highlights. My favorite player was LaDainian Tomlinson with the Chargers.
He cannot do. Charger fans are witnessing history!
So I wanted to be a running back, but my parents were like, we don't want you taking all those hits. You're pretty smart. You have good aptitude as far as taking accountability and responsibility. And so I started training at quarterback, and from around 8 to 10, I was training in quarterback, but I was still playing flag football. Then in flag, I'd play running back, receiver, that type of stuff. And it was all fun. But that first season of tackle football at quarterback, I fell in love with it. And I played pretty well. We had a good year. Growing up in Texas, it was the thing to be. And eventually went on to Hutto High School.
Pace isn't just doing all these extracurriculars, though, and not performing on the field. He's up for the starting job at UCLA, one of the nation's fastest rising football programs under former NFL coach Chip Kelly. Now, obviously, you ended up at UCLA, but you were a star in high school, the Gatorade Player of the Year. What was your recruiting process like?
Going back to how I was raised by, my mother is a teacher. My father, while he's not a teacher, a lot of his grandparents, great-grandparents were in the school system either as teachers or principals. And so I always took pride in academics first. Throughout my process in high school, it wasn't your typical recruiting story, especially as a Gatorade Player of the Year. I had 3,000 yards my sophomore year, and after that, I really had no offers until I went to the QB Collective camp, and Coach Mike McNeil, the head coach of the Dolphins now, saw me and he asked what schools I had offers from, and he was surprised when I said none. So that day he called up the head coach at Yale, and Yale offered me my first offer, and so that got the ball rolling as far as the Ivy Leagues. Over my junior year, I was one of the best passers in the state. My team had a lot of success, so I started to gain more notoriety. Right before my senior year, I was invited out to a camp by Coach Kelly, really through a connection that had happened through Coach Trent Dilfer, and I ripped it. They offered me on the spot, and I committed on the spot. And after that happened, a lot of the schools that thought I was talented, thought I could play college ball, but were hesitant to be the first large P5 offer, started checking in. But at that point, I was already committed. And I felt like if I was going to pass on offers I had from Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, that I had to choose a school that both had football, but also extremely good academics. And it's the #1 public institution in the country. It's in Los Angeles, and it was where I was born. and to be able to come back to UCLA has been a huge blessing, and I feel like I've maximized every opportunity I've had here.
In 2020, you led the Bruins into Autzen Stadium to play against Oregon, arguably one of the hardest places to play a college football game in the NCAA. Talk to me about what that game was like for you, and then the following games as QB1.
I think when I think about my college decision to go to UCLA, there's been a lot of wins that I've had. But in truth, I came here to play football and to win a Rose Bowl or national championship. And to have the opportunity to represent the school that I put a lot of work into on a daily basis, and to be able to play with guys who I'm practicing with, training with every single day, it's fun. You know, I'm a quarterback at heart. I feel like I'm a quarterback in everything that I do. But when I'm on that field, it's one of the best mind states that I'm in. Something I pride myself on is being a great performer, whether it be on this interview, in a speech, in a classroom, but most importantly on the field. And to be able to hone in, we should have beat Oregon. I mean, next week we clapped up Arizona, so that was fun. Being able to also play in the Rose Bowl, and in my first start at the Rose Bowl, win a place where my grandfather, I think around 56 years ago, had won a Rose Bowl with Purdue. It was a huge full circle moment, and truth be told, I'm staying ready, because this fall I'm 2-3 years better than I was then. I'll always be prepared as long as my name's called.
While Chase is a beast on the field, it's his work off the field and in business that makes him special and helps him stand out from the crowd. It's this drive and pursuit of excellence that has led Chase to become a 2-time NIL Athlete of the Year, and has led to him partnering with companies such as Degree and Chase Bank. When NIL was first passed in July of 2021, a lot of people just thought it was a massive cash grab for athletes, but you took it a little bit further and made it something bigger than yourself, which has helped you stand out amongst your college athlete peers. Talk to me about NIL, its impact, and any tips that you have for fellow college athletes.
Well, before I address NIL, I think it's important to point out that a Bruin really spearheaded that entire case. And shout out Ed O'Bannon, a Naismith player, we are national champ, someone in the long line of Bruins who's contributed greatly to social equity and progress. As far as my NIL journey, when I first got to UCLA, I wasn't thinking about NIL. I was thinking about, how do I build a network to where I don't regret not going to Harvard and building the network there. And in a space like LA, I was able to capitalize on a lot of things because of my positioning, but also because of my experience and who I am. Going back to high school, I was arguably the face of my town for 3 years, especially the last 2 years when we received a whole bunch of media coverage. I've been getting media coverage since I was in middle school. So being in front of a camera, having conversations like this, being authentic to myself has always been in my repertoire. And it was honed in and practiced a lot in high school. I was doing multiple interviews a week, radio appearances, all of that. So that by the time I got to UCLA, I already had a lot of media training. And going into campus, I graduated in 2.5 years. I was on all the student athlete clubs that you're supposed to be on. I represented UCLA to get to Governor Gavin Newsom amidst COVID as far as the return to training policies. I represented UCLA to the Pac-12 Council. And so the same way I was representing my town, my school in high school, I was practicing that again in college, except now I had LinkedIn, I had social media, and a large enough following to where people were seeing what I was doing. And I was capturing it and putting it out there in a way that's authentic to me, and in a way that showed clearly to brands that I could generate return on investment for them. And it would be a safe bet in a new industry, which is always the perfect find, I feel. My first deal was actually with Degree. I was reached out to on LinkedIn by the VP of marketing for Unilever, who does marketing for Degree. And so they reached out, said I should put my name in for this campaign, and I'm forever grateful to Rob Master and the whole group over at Unilever and Degree. It was a great campaign. We generated a lot of return on investment for them, and they got a lot of great PR. And then it scaled on from there. And once I set a precedent of working with #1 brands in their fields like Degree, it gave me a confidence, it gave me a price point and a market point to where I could point to and say, these are the types of deals that I want to do. In each one of my deals, I take pride in my value system, which is my personal values. I consider myself a believer, a winner, and a provider. And I look for other brands that mirror that. From that, I can generate economic value for myself, for my family, for my future family. Then from that economic value, I can create community value and empower the communities that I care about surrounding me. That goes into my partnership with the LA Food Bank and other philanthropic efforts.
While Chase makes an impact on his community with NIL, He's also living up to his family's high educational standards, graduating UCLA in 2.5 years from undergrad, and since completing his master's degree, with NCAA years of eligibility still ahead of him. One quote that Chase said that really stuck out for me was around financial literacy and how athletes are really kept in the dark about money.
I think the best thing about NIL is it's a precursor or a jump starter to what we can do post-college. When you looked at the 80% of athletes in revenue generating sports going broke within 3 or 4 years after leaving their pro careers, it was because we were kept blind, deaf, and dumb from any type of monetary experience while we were in college. The time of education, the time where our classmates are CEO in their early companies, are getting into the startup space, are building their future business network. Now that we have exposure to that ecosystem and we can monetize the value that we've been creating for our universities forever, now we can tap into that knowledge going forward.
I hope you don't leave today's episode blind, deaf, and dumb when it comes to NIL and learn something from Chase. If you enjoyed this episode of Athletes Only, consider subscribing to my channel for more great stories in sport. And if you haven't already, check out Chase's new podcast with NFL star Kayvon Thibodeau, where they share more NIL tips. And if you want